You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you for joining me here today on our Weight Loss and Wednesday show, where we want to cover a topic that I think is being brushed under the rug, and that's because it's difficult for a lot of people to see the connection between the foods they eat. I'm talking about healthy foods they eat, and inflammation, and how that's also caused them to look puffier, not be able to eat carbohydrates to the certain extent that they would like to, and then causing a whole host of digestive-based issues. What I want to do today is really pull it all together. I want to show you how the foods that you're eating, if you are sensitive to them, and again, they can be healthy foods, that they're actually making your ability to stay lean and trim that much more difficult. So this applies to the people who might have like 5 pounds to 10 pounds to lose, but it's kind of really around their belly and they just can't get rid of that belly fat no matter what they do. Or it could be those people who that no matter what they honestly just look at in terms of food, they seem to gain weight and they can't keep the weight off successfully. I want to share with you exactly what that is. And this, to be really honest, did not come to me, meaning like I did not know a lot about this until about 7 years ago when I started to do a lot more food sensitivity testing. So I got my food allergies and sensitivities tested way back. I mean, this was, again, as I started to get into functional medicine. So when conventional medicine couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, I was either left to say, well, you're either going to get much, much worse. This is what they said. You'll get much worse, and then we'll be able to diagnose some type of disease or dis-ease of the body, right? Because then it'll be on your blood work. Or maybe you'll get better. Well, the truth was I wasn't getting any better. I would get better for maybe a week or two, whatever that was, and then I would just relapse again. So after a while of being really fed up with the system, as I call it, because again, it's not the MD's fault, it's the system, it's what they're taught, it's how they have to practice, to be honest. Meaning like you come in with X and then you're diagnosed with Y and then Z is given for a medication and hey, that's it. Like that's the merry-go-round. And if the medication stops working, you switch medications. And if that stops working, well, then you just go to a stronger dosage. And if that doesn't work, then we just need to cut it out of your body, whatever it is, whether it's an organ or your heart or maybe your brain. But in one case or another, like that's how it works. Now, for me, I needed to find another answer. I couldn't live like this. I was going into college and it was not a life I could subsist on. So what I did, and again, like I have no idea. I really just thank my parents for this. Somehow they found this thing called alternative medicine 20 plus years ago. No idea what that was. But we tested for adrenal function. We looked at cortisol. We tested food sensitivities. We tested hair tissue mineral analysis. Those were the first 3 labs that we ran. And then we later ran a candida test. Then we later ran a stool-based test to look for all these different things. Remarkable. And again, like so thankful for the doctors. Well, it was essentially 1 or 2 practitioners that got me started on this path. Did it have all the answers? No, not in the beginning. But this was relatively new 20 plus years ago. It really was 20 years ago. So here's what we did though. We found out my food sensitivities. What is a food sensitivity? Let's start there for those people who don't know. It means that it's a food that when eaten, you have some type of immune-based reaction to. It doesn't mean like a peanut allergy where you eat it and you're going to potentially die because of an anaphylactic-based reaction where your throat's closing up, you're swelling up. It's not that. A sensitivity means that your body is allergic to that, air quotes around allergic, because it's having an immune-based reaction. Now, what is that? Well, and a typical short-term reaction would be an IgE reaction, so immunoglobulin E, so IgE, okay? There's a lot of different immunoglobulins, which think of it as just white blood cells or immune cells. Now, the E, think of E as immediate. I know that's not spelled exactly the same, but think of E, immediate. Okay, so we think of that. That means that someone with your typical shellfish reaction. All right, so this person eats oysters. They love oysters, but every time they eat oysters, They get hives, they get a skin rash, they get itchy eyes, they might get brain fog, maybe a headache, maybe whatever, okay? Those are all very typical reactions of an IgE immunoglobulin reaction. So what is that, okay? It means that when they eat that food within minutes or at most hours, their body is having a very quick reaction to that food. It says whatever this food is, again, the proteins in that food, even if it's a carbohydrate or a fat, everything has proteins, amino acid strains in it. It's saying is the body does not like that specific protein chain, those chain of amino acids. It recognizes it. It's armed, which means a lot of times you have to eat the food twice. The first time is the primer. Okay, now your body recognizes it and it sets up immune cells to attack that antigen, that food, the next time you put it back in your body. That's why it's dangerous for kids. Sometimes they eat peanuts once, totally fine. The second time, boom, that's when they get that reaction. The body sees the food, it's primed, and then it reacts the second time. But that's still an IgE reaction, okay? Again, skin rash, itchiness, hives, ears turn red, eyes start to water, especially in kids. We see this all the time in kids. Red cheeks, watery eyes, mood changes, irritability, can't sit still. These are really common things in kids. Kids that we diagnose with ADD, ADHD, OCD, executive functioning disorder, all these things we see in my practice clear up when we start to do a few things. Clear up the gut and obviously fix these immune-based issues, which in this case is food-based sensitivities. So important, but very overlooked because a lot of us, we're trying to give our kids healthy foods. Yeah, they can enjoy their cheat foods every once in a while, but for the most part, we're trying to do healthy foods. Here's the problem. Healthy foods can also cause sensitivities in certain people. Right now, it's shown that about 3 out of 4 people have an immune-based sensitivity to foods. That means the majority of people you see walking down the street have some type of food-based allergen or some type of sensitivity. Now, at varying degrees, meaning like they have immediate reactions or they have a delayed reaction, which we're going to talk about in a moment because most people are delayed reactions. All right. So that's causing just low-grade inflammation at all the times. And about 1/3 of those are those gluten-based sensitivities, right? So about 1 out of 33 people have a gluten-based sensitivity, but it's from what's called an immunoglobulin G, not E, but now G sensitivity. So what is that? Well, it's G is delayed or a latent-based response. That means when the same person now, they have those oysters. We'll stick with oysters for whatever reason. I'm in an oysters mood. When you eat oysters, you have a reaction a day later or 2 days later or even up to 72 hours later. That is a delayed reaction. That's an immunoglobulin G reaction. So that means when you eat these things, you don't get the same hives typically, the same skin rash. You could get the skin rash, but you could get the headache, the migraine, the low mood, the brain fog, the fatigue, the fibromyalgia, the dark circles, whatever it might be. But all a consequence of this low-grade inflammation, which we're going to be talking about right now, and how it can really make the body inflamed and puffy. So why does that matter? Well, it matters for a few reasons. One is it's so hard to figure this out. And here's why. Let's say you listen to this podcast on a Wednesday. Think about this. Do you remember the foods you ate on Sunday and Monday? Do you remember all the foods? Do you remember all the ingredients? Because if you don't, well, then how can you figure out which one of those foods might be causing your reaction today? Now, again, from a clinical perspective, it can happen up to 72 hours, but I'll just let you know from a clinical perspective, that means a practitioner seeing this every day in their practice, I can tell you usually it's a day or two delayed. So let's say today is Wednesday, you're listening to the show. It's a food that you ate yesterday or the night before, all right? That's what's causing you the low mood, again, the joint pain, the irritability, the difficulty focusing, studying, that type of thing, or puffiness. Maybe you've gained a little bit of weight. You don't have no idea why, but it can be from this latent-based response. So you don't get the hives, and that's the tricky part, right? You don't get the bloating. You might not have the digestive issues. You just seem to be a little inflamed. You feel run down, your joints hurt, or you just look puffy, you look swollen. And it's really hard for you to lose that weight, especially right around the middle, right? Food sensitivities tend to do that. They make the stomach look a little puffy, a little swollen. Why? Well, part of it is that low-grade inflammation especially can go right around there, right around the gut. But again, it does affect the entire body, all the way from the brain to the ankles, right? Or even the big toe could be a leading contributor to gout as well. So how can we figure this out? All right. So we have the common food allergens that everyone has, right? Or I shouldn't say that everyone has. My big thing is I need to see what the research says. So I always go into the research. What do the research say? Well, the research says, when we look at that specifically, I say, okay, the research, when I'm looking at the most common food allergens, I'm saying, well, the most common ones are going to come from the things that we know. Corn, It's going to come from gluten, which is wheat and pastries and processed foods and pasta, anything wheat-based, okay? It's a common one. It doesn't mean you have celiac, right? That's the big thing. Well, I don't have celiac. Well, I agree, because not a very large number of people have celiac. They can't peg it down, but maybe somewhere around 1% of the population, okay? Still a decent number, but still just a percentage of the population. Where if you eat celiac, well, then you're looking at real autoimmune-based issues. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, how the immune reaction takes place. But for most people, just some low-grade inflammation when they eat gluten. And again, not the same day. It's the next day. That's why we have to look at the IgG reaction. Okay, so we know gluten's there, sure. People feel fine when they eat it, but the next day, maybe a little bit of bloating or maybe just, again, that little bit of that puffiness, that joint pain. So we've got gluten, we've got corn, we've got eggs. I always talk about that. Not enough people know if they have an egg sensitivity. Again, because it's not typically immediate, it's delayed. Soy, we know about soy. What about nuts? A lot of people don't even know they're walking around with a nut allergies. That was one of the biggest thing that I figured out, is that I was sensitive to almonds. I was eating almonds every single day mid-afternoon, every single day. I was like, this is a healthy snack. And if I'm trying to be healthy and I'm trying to get over my dis-ease right now, and I need to regulate my blood sugar because I had Addison's disease back then, I need to figure out how I don't keep dipping into low blood sugar and crashing and just getting angry and irritable, and you don't want to be around me when I'm in a hangry, low blood sugar mood. So I was like, all right, every mid-afternoon, whether I'm hungry or not, I'm going to eat that quarter of a cup or a little bit more of almonds. And they're going to be raw, they're going to be sprouted, I'm going to do this the right way. Well, turns out I had an almond sensitivity. I only figured that out after I did the IgG test. I'm going to explain that in a minute. Again, you don't have to do this because I'm giving you the most common foods right now if you don't want to do the testing, but you're welcome to. We always give you multiple options to see what works best for you and your children as well, because this is great for kids. So these are foods that you can look at eliminated. Now, an elimination diet is about 6 weeks. Okay, that's what most people in functional medicine say. I totally agree with that as well. So we've got corn, we've got gluten, we've got eggs, we've got soy, we've got tree nuts. What are tree nuts? Well, almonds and walnuts and pecans and pistachios, hazelnuts. Then we have yeast. Okay, that's another big one that a lot of people are not looking at, because yeast could be a gluten-free product, but it's leaven. So people go from a gluten-based product. I've talked about this before, why going gluten-free may not be good for you. Check out that podcast if you haven't. Why gluten-free may not be good for you. Check that out. Here's what I'm going to do. I need to make this easy for you. Go to stevencabral.com/726 and then check out that, because I did that podcast a long time ago. So I'm putting in my notes right now, why going gluten-free may not be good for you. All right, I'll make sure that my team links that up. So then another thing, again, you don't always need to eliminate this, but sometimes a good idea to eliminate citrus and nightshades. Not everyone needs to, okay? Not everyone needs to. But a lot of times, if you're dealing with allergies or an autoimmune-based condition or joint pain, those are the people that I'm eliminating nightshades and citrus for if I need to. Meaning that if I don't get those joints cleared up within 6 weeks, okay, now we're going to do a little bit more work to eliminate the histamines, like in the citrus fruits. And I'm also going to cut down on the nightshades, which are a very specific lectin that can affect a small percentage of the population, but important if you do have joint-based pain. Okay, so really simple. You could do that, or you could run what's called an IgG test. You can do this right at home. Very simple. You get a lab test mailed to you. What do? You literally poke your finger. So you use a little lancet. It's very simple. You press it against your finger, just like a type 2 diabetic will, and then you drip. You don't touch your finger to the card, but you drip the blood drops right onto the card. You let it dry. You mail it in. All the labs get sent to my office. I read your results. We give you a little plan, which is amazing. And then you're going to speak with one of my health coaches, and we show you exactly what your food sensitivities are, what's causing inflammation in your body, and what is causing, which I'm going to go over now, all of the different symptoms that you may be having. Again, I did it for both of my kids. I always do. So I recommend it for kids in my practice. I walk the walk as best as I can. And again, I did it for my girls, figured out what their sensitivities were, and just try to stay away from it for them. You know, again, one of them had an egg sensitivity, one didn't. So I just know that one of my daughters, we're going to go less on the eggs. And I would just walk you through that, meaning like a mild sensitivity, you eliminate for 6 weeks, a moderate, 12 weeks, and then a very strong sensitivity, you're going to eliminate for 6 months. And then what you're going to do is, if you choose to, you're going to retest. And you'll retest to see if your body has now decreased its sensitivity to that food after healing the gut, which typically does happen. Again, these are food sensitivities because oftentimes there's a little bit of intestinal permeability, a little bit of leaky gut, or that food has been marked as an antigen, a foreign body to the body that must be attacked by an immune-based cell. And it's doing that to protect you because it recognizes that foreign. And we have ways that we can start to rebuild the gut wall because of that. Okay? and again, I've done whole shows on how to repair leaky gut. So just type in leaky gut at stephencabral.com/podcast, and you'll get plenty of shows on how to rebuild that gut. Okay. So now I want to get into this because not a lot of people know this, practitioners and people alone. How is it possible that your food sensitivities are leading, again, I'm not going to go into today the fibromyalgia, the joint pain, the brain fog, the trouble focusing, all that. I want to go into specifically today. How does the inflammation, which causes all of those things, how does the inflammation actually make people look puffy? How does it make them retain weight? How does it make it more difficult to lose weight? Because I know a lot of people do. And again, their well-meaning coach or personal trainer or an article they read online just says, you know what? You need to exercise a little bit more. You need to do these core exercises. You need to do more cardio, more intervals, more fasting, more whatever, right? More of everything. But the truth is that a lot of times, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, the answer is not always more. If you're doing more, if you're already exercising, you're already eating well, within reason. Again, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be perfect. Exercise 3 days a week, ideally 4. But exercise 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, every other day. You're doing great. Get your 10,000 steps in a day walking. If you're only doing 3, don't do 10,000, do 4,000, right? Work yourself up another 10 minutes per day, per week. You're doing great. That's what we need to do. Okay. Now let's say you get your exercise in, you're eating pretty well, you're eating well except for maybe one cheat meal per week. You're still not losing the weight or still can't lose it around the middle. You still feel kind of bloated and you're retaining all this water weight. Why is that? Well, we need to look deeper. We don't need to do more at that point. What we need to do is we need to do less. And that means we need to subtract from the body. That means we need to subtract some type of imbalance. Inflammation, hormone overload, toxin overload, all of those things. Okay, so what do we need to do? Here's what we need to do. We need to understand that the foods we eat, if we have a sensitivity to them and they're health food, like for me, again, almonds. Once I eliminated almonds, my stomach actually did become flatter and I wasn't as inflamed. I didn't have as much brain fog. It took me to doing well to doing even better. It was incremental progress that then led me to the next step and the next step. I actually felt better. And I did that after eliminating that. I know I had other allergies. I had kidney bean allergies. Who would have thought that I had kidney bean allergies, right? That's not a normal one, but I had that. So now when I'm eating these healthy chilies that I made for myself, guess what? Kidney beans is one of the main proteins. Well, now I know that I couldn't do kidney beans. I could do black beans, but I couldn't do kidney beans. Easy switch, right? I couldn't do almonds, but I could do macadamia or I could do another nut. So that's why it's not as difficult as you think because you get to switch a 1-for-1. Like it's not that bad. You just need to know what you're sensitive to. And again, if you come out sensitive to a lot of things, well, that's a pretty dead giveaway that you most likely have leaky gut. You need to repair that gut in general. All right. So before I go too far off track again, what I want you to understand is that when you eat one of these foods that you're sensitive to, you put in your body. Let's go back to almonds for me. I'm doing something healthy for my body. It's okay. I'm eating almonds. They're low glycemic. They're good and healthier fats. I get my omegas. I've got some omega-6s in there. Pretty good balance. They're raw. All that good stuff. Okay. So I'm eating them. But when I eat them and 2-3 hours later, they're in my intestines, my body is actually attacking those proteins. All right. So what's happening is that my body looks at those proteins and says, okay, this is foreign. This is not part of my body. What we need to do is create some type of immune response to mark it and eliminate it from the body. So here's what happens. Well, the immune cells can work in 2 ways. You don't have to have leaky gut. That's the problem. A lot of people think you have to have leaky gut to have food sensitivities. You do not. So what can happen is the cells, the immune cells, can actually work their way into the lamina propria, into the intestinal wall, because it's a 2-way street for white blood cells. They can go in, and they can actually attack that food, okay, or the what's left, the amino acids of that food. So what happens is your body then gets inflammation inside the intestines. That can cause swelling because inflammation causes swelling, okay? So that's one reason the gut can start to look swollen. The other is as those proteins are coming out, now the immune cells are attacking them within the blood. That can then move to the joints. I mean, it can move anywhere, like literally anywhere. Think of Hashimoto's. How it can move to the thyroid. That inflammation can move multiple spots. What I want to talk about is overall inflammation today in the body. So when your body causes inflammation, again, you have 28 feet of digestive tract. That's a lot of inflammation. And it literally goes from your rib cage all the way down to the bottom of your, well, let's say like 2-3 inches below your belly button. It's your small intestine, okay? So if it goes all the way down, that's a big spot just for the mainstay of inflammation. Of course, why you can see that area might be a little puffier, but then it goes through the entire bloodstream, which is your whole body. And that inflammation, here's the amazing thing about inflammation. This is really something that we learn about more and more every day, and that's why I want to teach it to you and I want to teach it to the health practitioners, is that inflammation can help or cause two misfires in the body. One is insulin. So insulin receptors do not work as well. Now, why does that matter? Well, if insulin is not working as well, then when you eat starches or carbohydrates in general, you're not going to be able to take that sugar and glucose, which again, think of any carbohydrate, it breaks down to glucose. That's basically what it does, or simple sugars. Now, the sugars, that's not a bad thing, but it has to make its way inside the cell. And if it doesn't do that, well, now your body has to produce insulin. And if the insulin is not working, meaning like the key is not working to unlock that cell, well, then your body starts to produce more and more insulin. Now, a couple things happen. You can go to, then you produce so much insulin, the sugar eventually gets in, and you're left with insulin in the bloodstream, which lowers the blood sugar too low. So now you get a crash. Now you crave even more carbohydrates. You're like, why am I craving all these carbs? Is it candida? Is it low blood sugar? Is it what is it? And it can be multiple reasons, because again, candida can cause the same type of inflammation. So it's possible that you have candida, which is why I tell people, run the organic acids test. Run the organic acids test, run the food sensitivity test. You will know. It will show you. And believe it or not, on this food sensitivity test, if you can only do one, if you run the food sensitivity test, it tests for candida as well. It tests for almost like a titer. It tests for your marker. Like, what's your immunoglobulin? What are your immune cells doing? Have they attacked candida lately in your blood? It will show you that. It's an amazing test. That's why I love lab testing. It tells you literally black and white, yes or no. Do you have food sensitivities? Yes or no, from an IgG perspective. Do you have candida? Is it high? Again, it won't give you what the organic acids test does, but it will give you from an immune cell-based perspective, which I think is remarkable as well. Okay, so we talked about insulin. If your insulin is not working right, well, you're going to start to gain body fat. And that's because you can't soak up that sugar. And that's why, again, intermittent fasting, phenomenal, right? Phenomenal. Why? Well, part of it's just because you're not taking in food sensitivities. If you skip breakfast, you're not eating food sensitivities for breakfast. Common foods for breakfast are what? Eggs and wheat and all of these things. Again, like, that's why I always try to go to the core. I really do. I try to peel back that onion until I get to the middle of the onion. And even then, I'm trying to peel back the tiny little pieces. What is the main reasons? What are the main reasons? What are the main reasons? So they say, sure, intermittent fasting and all this stuff, all fantastic, all fantastic. But why? Why? That's what I'm looking at, digestion. We have to start there. So now, okay, I understand. If you have food sensitivities, that causes inflammation. Inflammation messes up blood sugar. That causes, again, insulin-based issues. And now we're starting to add body fat. Okay, so now I get that. Now there's one more. And that's because in the hypothalamus in the brain, that inflammation throws off the ability to produce leptin. So if our body becomes insulin resistant, well, now we can't pick up the sugar, we can't get in the cells. And if our body becomes leptin resistant, well, at this point, not a good thing. Our body signals, our brain signals to our body, I should say, you don't need to burn body fat. Store body fat. We're in a survival-based state. No need to burn it. We need to save this because we might be in some type of an environment where we need to hold on to calories, so let's slow down the metabolism, and let's hold on for burning body fat right now. Not a great place to be. So what happens? Well, you get a triple whammy. We'll put it that way. One is you can't use carbohydrates now as efficiently. Number two is you're not burning body fat. And number three, the inflammation generates more cytokines, which again is an inflammatory chemical messengers. And these guys, again, create inflammation in the body, can be systemic. And that inflammation causes a greater amount of white blood cells. A lot of times in this case, again, I don't want it to get too scientific, but it can create things like eosinophils. It can create basophils in the body, which again can have to do with parasites. A lot can go into this. But these things actually make you retain water. That's why I call it toxic water weight. So what do we do about all this? So I gave you a lot of information today. Maybe it's information and inflammation overload. What do we do? Okay, here's what we need to do. You have a couple different options. One is first you can test. I want to give you an action step. I've given you a lot of information. I could talk about this for days, but here's what we need to do. One is test. You can run the food sensitivity test. Simple at-home test for yourself, for your kids, your nieces, your nephews, your parents, your grandparents, whatever it might be. Everyone should test it. It's great. You do it once, you find out what your sensitivities are. No need to retest for at least 3 to 4 months. Then you can retest if you choose to. If you're not, just eliminate it. Just eliminate the food and add it back in. If it's a food that you really love, great. We tell you exactly how to do that. But believe me, this is why we do it. Because I don't want to just give you the lab test. Great, the data's fine, but you need my recommendations. Well, again, you don't need mine. You can go to another health practitioner. You're welcome to do that. You need the information. But you also get my health coach. My health coaches are going to walk you through this step by step. You can join our support group. I mean, all sorts of great things. Okay, so you can lab test. You can do the food sensitivity test, and you can run the organic acids test for yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth in the gut to see if you actually have that leaky gut. You can check that. All right. Now, the next thing you could do is say, all right, I don't want to run the test. Let me just do an elimination diet. All right. Well, here's what you can do. You make it easy on yourself, eliminate the foods that I spoke about before, or do something like the Dr. Cabral detox. And again, it doesn't have to be hours. You can do what's called a functional medicine elimination diet. Why do I recommend that? Because without you knowing it, you are eliminating all of the most common food sensitivities. And that's because, so I'll just kind of pull back the curtain. As a naturopathic doctor, or let's just say you're a functional medicine practitioner, you study this thing called an elimination diet. And that is eliminating the most potent foods that, although healthy, trigger autoimmune. They trigger all of these different immune-based sensitivities, which again lead to the dark circles under the eyes, the puffiness, the weight gain, the skin issues, the rashes, the psoriasis, the autoimmune, which I spoke about, like Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, MS, lupus, all of them, okay? So what you do is we're trained to eliminate these foods, which is great. But now, by doing something like the detox on top of it, a 21-day, okay, that's what I recommend, 21-day detox, is that you're going to decrease inflammation as a consequence of reducing your food sensitivities, of rebalancing insulin and blood sugar, by rebalancing hormones, okay? Part of those are leptin and ghrelin, because now you're balancing out blood sugar. So if you actually drop back into normal blood sugar, you're going to signal then the balance between the two, which is leptin and ghrelin. If you want to know more about leptin and ghrelin, I did a whole podcast on it. Literally type in LEPTIN into stephencabral.com/podcast. You'll learn about those two hormones and why you need them balanced in order to lose weight. So you can do that. But the other thing it does as well is it starts to decrease all of these different chemical sensitivities and chemical messages in the body called the cytokines. So that's what it does. It's very simple. It walks you through it step by step. And it also gives you 2 days of a liquid fast of a hypoallergenic formula, which is specific to lower your total antigen load, lower your food sensitivity load. Meaning like I developed this, I formulated it already knowing ahead of time what the most common food sensitivities are. There's no dairy, there's no egg, there's no corn, there's no soy, there's no yeast. Like I went through all of it and I painstakingly created this formula. And again, it's the cornerstone of our practice. We get such phenomenal results. And I understand that we're not going to be able to see every person in our practice. I get that. And that was never my intent. I don't want that to be the intent. I want you to be able to take control of your health. That's my highest recommendation is you're going to either lab test first. You're going to do something like the 21-day or even 7-day, but ideally the 21-day Dr. Cabral detox. Because at the end of it, if you feel better, which you will, but if you feel better, you'll know that you had real food sensitivities, okay? You had real inflammation. So what you're going to do then is start to add your favorite foods back in one at a time. And by doing that, you're going to be able to do a variable-based test. Meaning like if you add that one food back in, you're doing your maintenance plan, you're doing a smoothie every morning, whatever you want to do, but you add that one food in, and if after 3 days to 5 days, you ate it a couple times, you still feel okay, most likely that food's not a sensitivity. But then you might try the next one. If that food causes a reaction, you're like, oh, okay, it was this food. So it's kind of a roundabout kind of way, and you can figure out what your sensitivities are. Now, if you don't want to do the Dr. Cabral detox, you don't want to do lab testing, you simply can do a functional medicine elimination-based diet where you are eliminating the most common food sensitivities, which are the dairy, the gluten, the egg, the corn, the soy, the nuts. Those are the big ones, okay? I know it seems like you're eliminating a lot, but you can do it. Again, I try to make it as easy as possible. On our detox, I actually give you a shopping list. And the shopping list tells you which foods you can eat, which foods you can't. Very, very simple, very straightforward. And you can make your own meals. Choose your favorite protein, choose a few of your favorite veggies, choose a nice healthy fat like olive oil or a little avocado or anything like that. And you can, be well on your way. But the truth is this, is that the only way you figure these out is to start doing different tests. Again, you can do the lab test or you just test by actually doing the elimination, okay? But that's how you figure this out. I want you to be successful. I want you to be able to lose the weight. But more importantly, as I told you, it's not just about calories in, calories out. It's not. That's a basic thing, okay? You have to do that first. But once you've done that, I understand how frustrating it can be. So what I want to do is take the frustration away. Take the frustration away and understand that it's not you, that there are things going on inside your body that you can't see, that once you get them balanced, you feel like a new human being. It worked for me. It works for the people in my practice, and I want it to work for you as well. So hopefully this helped. Please feel free. Let me know what I missed, what I should talk about, what I should do a follow-up on. I really do appreciate that. This show is all about you. and I want to make sure it's worth your time and worth your while. So please feel free to share the show with anyone it can help. As always, thank you again for tuning into the Cabral Concept. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.